So let's discuss about this. What is high availability and how it works. So basically, you know that in your organization, if you are forwarding the traffic using single firewall, right? So there would be chances that the firewall required a maintenance or firewalls get failed due to any reason, maybe hardware failure or software failure, right? So if you rely on the single device, so there are chances for single point of failure. To avoid this, what we used to do, we used to configure firewall in a HA mode. That means we take two firewall, right? And we configure them in a HA mode so that they would be together providing the resiliency. And if there is any requirement for the maintenance, so at a time, you know, other firewall would provide the services. So let's take example of this. I have a system over here, which is user system, which want to access internet, right? So if we set up the communication like this way, right? So this system can send the traffic over the internet either using this link or this link, any link this system can use, right? So let's say this is my firewall one, and this is my firewall two. So using any of the firewall, traffic can be sent. Okay. So this is the work of HA. HA is just providing the resiliency, right? So using the resiliency, our network would be redundant. And if we just want to do the maintenance without any downtime, we can do the maintenance to our network. That's what the main purpose of the HA. In FortiGate, it support two type of HA. It support active and active passive. So it supports active passive HA. If I talk about types of HA, so it support two type of HA. Number one, it support active passive, and number two, it supports active. It support two type of HA. In active passive, one device at a time would be active and other device would be working as a standby mode, which is passive. So it means when if we talk about the active passive, let's say this device is active and this device is passive, right? So in active passive, traffic would be always forward through the active firewall. The passive firewall just would be on the listening mode. I mean, maybe session from the firewall 1 to firewall 2 is going to sync, but this firewall would never process the traffic uh, until the firewall 1 down. So let's say if firewall 1 goes down, on that case this passive firewall would become active, right? And would start the processing the traffic. So that's the active passive. In active mode, both firewall would be processing the traffic. Firewall 1 would be processing the traffic and firewall 2 would be processing the traffic. So that's how it works, right? So now I would talk about that, how it would be decided that which firewall would be active and which firewall would be passive. So there is a decision happen based on the priority value. So basically you are going to define the priority over here, and based on the priority, the firewall would become active or passive. So there is a priority value, which is a decider value, which is a decider for role, that which firewall would be working as active, which firewall would be working as a passive. The higher value, the higher value would be winner. The higher value would be winner over here. So let's say for firewall 1, we decided that priority should be 150. And for firewall 2, let's say we have decided that value should be 140. So, active would be firewall 1. If I do in a reverse manner, let's say I decided that this should be 150 and this should be 140. On that case, this would be active firewall, firewall 2 would be active, and firewall 1 would be passive firewall. Now I'm talking about the criteria, that what all the criteria based on, these firewall uh, would be participating in the HA. So I'm talking about that eligibility criteria. So let's talk about what is the eligibility to participate these firewall into the HA. So let's talk about the eligibility, that what is the requirement that these firewall should be part of the HA. So number one requirement, the software version. Software version. Their software version should be same on both firewall, which is 40 OS. If we are using, let's say, as example, if we are using 7.0, so on the other firewalls, it should be 7.0. So software version should be same. Number two, model. Firewall model should be same. Number three, same licenses. Same licenses. Number four, interfaces. Interfaces should be same. So if we are using, let's say here we are using, let's say Ethernet 1 or port number 1, let's say as a outbound. So here also we have to use port number as a 1 as a outbound. So interface configuration should be same. Okay. So these are the things which should be same. Now we would be talking about the protocol which is responsible for entire clustering. So like a checkpoint, in checkpoint we have CCP protocol which is responsible for the clustering bounding. So here in FortiGate we have the FGCP. There is a FGCP protocol. FGCP stands for FortiGate Clustering Protocol. So this FGCP protocol, which is FortiGate Clustering Protocol, this is responsible for clustering services. So when you configure the FortiGate in the HA, so this protocol is responsible for entire clustering services. In FortiGate firewall, we would require a link as well, which is used for the heartbeat and sync. So there is a one link required, which can be used for link for heartbeat, which is called HA link. So basically this link for HA, and it could be one or you can configure two. This is used for sync and heartbeat. It is used for sync and heartbeat. So what is the meaning of sync over here? Whatever session is created through the firewall one, that session need to be sync on the firewall two. The reason is whenever let's say this firewall gets failed, so whatever the existing session would be, that should be resumed instead of disconnected. So as an example, let's say we are um, let's say user are calling through the Teams or Zoom. Session was established through the firewall one. Suddenly firewall one goes down. So firewall two took the charge. So whatever the session was here, the session was synced using this HA link to the firewall 2. So when this system sending the packet for a particular session, this firewall would be able to evaluate that session, there is an existing session, and this is going to be allowed. Else, what would happen? It would do the session setup since beginning, and at that time, user's phone call would get dropped. So we allow session sync so that any existing session should be synced to the another firewall, and if there is any failure to the active one, passive should take care of the traffic without any disruption. So that's for that we are going to use HA link, right? So this is what we do on the active passive, and in a active basically, let me just, if we talk about the active, so in active firewall, both firewall would be working um, as a active. At the same time, both firewall would be working as a active. So let me just do that. So at a time, both firewall would be working as a active, and both firewall would be processing the traffic. Okay. One more thing I forgot to mention over here. Whenever you are configuring firewall in a HA, you need to make sure that their group should be same group. Okay, so group is nothing but that is a logical value you are going to put, and you are making them both firewall putting you into the same group. So it's a similar to VRRP group, right? When you want to configure VRRP, you are going to assign the group to the router. Similar, you have to assign the group to the firewall over here. Okay, so any questions so far?
The active setup, I think it will be using VRP, isn't it?
Yeah, it is using VRRP.
Yeah.
Basically,
Okay.
it is it is using VRRP. On the back end, it is using VRRP, but you don't need to configure VRRP property over here. Okay. The reason being is it has adopted native, native HA. So you don't need to configure any additional VRRP part.
Also not interface configuration so that you have, let's say, .2 and .3 address?
You have to see in FortiGate you would
Hmm.
use the same IP on both firewall. That's
Also,
the beauty of this FortiGate firewall.
okay, also in active mode.
Yeah, in active
Oh,
mode as well. You
okay,
can
okay.
use the same IP. So
Mhm.
if I take example, let's say this is my outbound and this is inbound. So let's say inbound got IP like 10.10.10.1, or I would take different one. 10.20.20.1.
Mhm.
So on the other side as well, this is /24. So other side as well, you can use same IP over here. And if on this side, let's say it got 100 dot whatever, what IP I had taken. Let's say I would take this one. Okay. Enable show IP interface brief. Okay, so 101.0.0.1. So let's say it got 100.0.0.1 slash 24. So there as well, you can use same IP on the
Okay,
other end. You can use same IP, right? And this thing you can repeat over here as well.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And this FGCP protocol is layer 2, I believe. Huh?
This is layer 2. Yeah, this is layer
Yeah.
2. This one.
Okay. Yep.
This is layer 2. This is layer 2.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So let's go on the configuration part. So let me just see this. So what I would do, I would use these two firewall, FortiGate firewall 1 and FortiGate firewall 2. Then I would assign the IP according to this design.
Hmm.
So we are using port 1, sorry, port 2 and port 3. Port 1 is a management port. So we this is port 2 and this is port 3. Port 3. Let me just copy this. Port 2, port 3. Same thing I would do over here. Port 2 and then port 3. Right. So let me just configure those IP there according to this diagram. I would configure the IP. So I have this firewall 1, firewall 2. Okay. Let me access. HTTP colon slash slash 10.10.10.1. That's a management IP. So I'm accessing the firewall using management IP. Sorry, my firewall license has been expired, so I need to reset this firewall. Let me just reset both the firewall. One thing I forget to mention that we have the management IP as well. So let me tell you what is the management IP. So port one is the management, right? So I'm writing over here. Port one is the management. And for this port, I would be using this subnet 10.10.10.0/24. So for first firewall, I would take this IP 10.10.10.1. This is on firewall 1 and 10.10.10.2 would be on firewall 2. FW 2. Meanwhile, whatever this port is, this is port 4 I would be taking. Port, this is port 4. That would be layer 2 and that would be port 4. This is port 4. Okay, so